realize that both Ambassador Power, USUN, and the White House have spoken about this, so I'll be brief. On the abstention on the Cuba resolution in the General Assembly today, as you probably expected, members of Congress who do not agree with the administration's approach to Cuba are crying foul about this. And I'm wondering, does the administration no longer believe that it is its obligation as the executive to uphold or defend what is the law of the land?
Well, I think we've talked about this before, Matt. We understand what the law is, and the embargo is law. And so we have an obligation to obey it, and we do. That doesn't mean that we can't or shouldn't examine policies that we believe are in the best interest of the United States. And the president has made a decision, a policy decision, that it is in the best interest of the United States to establish diplomatic relations with Cuba and to seek the end of the embargo. But we all recognize it's still law. That's not being disputed here. What we're saying is that that we believe the embargo should be lifted, and the president will continue to work with Congress to that end.
Right. Well, I think everyone has heard that argument, but some people don't necessarily agree with it. They would say that the law is the law. It's not a policy. It is the law that governs the administration's conduct, and if the administration's conduct doesn't support that, or at least defend it in an international fora, doesn't that suggest, this argument goes, doesn't that suggest that the administration believes itself to be more, the executive believes itself to be more equal than at least one of the other two co-equal branches of government that we have in this country?
I don't know if it's physically possible to be more equal. If you're
Well,
equal, you're equal.
it's an expression from Animal Farm. You might have heard it.
You got me on literature there. But look, we obviously are fully cognizant of the fact that the embargo is law, and the administration doesn't hold itself above law. We obey the law, and that is the law.
Well, but
doesn't mean that.
But you won't defend it in front of before an international institution that is condemning it.
Well, I think as Ambassador Power said in her statement today, the president made clear his opposition to the embargo and called on Congress to take action to lift it. And yet, while the administration agrees that the U.S. embargo on Cuba should be lifted, we do not support the shift for the reason stated in the resolution itself. And as, again, I'm quoting the ambassador, but I think it's important, as she said very clearly, all actions of the United States with regard to Cuba have been and are fully in conformity with the UN Charter and international law, including applicable trade law and the customary law of the sea. So any idea or suggestion that we're somehow trying to flout law here is just inaccurate. But that doesn't mean that the president's policy, while it opposes the embargo, is wrong. It's the president's prerogative as commander-in-chief to set foreign policy for the United States. And his foreign policy is that we're going to establish diplomatic relations, we're going to open up our relationship with Cuba, and seek the end of the embargo, In other words, work with Congress to that end.
Right, until you get to that end,
we're going to obey the law.
Isn't it incumbent upon you that not only obey it, but to defend it against condemnation or criticism?
There were other things in the resolution that we took issue with that led to the abstention. But again, we're going to obey the law. We're going to follow the law. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with it and the basis for it. I mean, we had a discussion the other day, I think, about JASTA. It is the law of the land. We will obey the law of the land. But
except
we objected
to try and fix it.
We objected to it before it was passed. And as I think I made clear that the Secretary is going to stay engaged on this issue to continue to try to seek a better outcome. But it
Okay,
is the law.
yeah, right. JASTA is not a very good example because, yes, you did object to it beforehand, but you didn't object to this administration couldn't have objected to the embargo before it was, because the president was just born then, maybe, when it passed.
Yeah.
So there was
My point
there's
is,
a big difference here.
I
So-
didn't mean it was a perfect example.
No,
but
no,
the
no,
point I'm trying to
get it,
make
but-
is you can still follow the law and obey the law at the same time having a discussion with Congress about your concerns
Right,
about it.
except that some of these people, some of the members of Congress who have come out expressed concern on both sides of the aisle, not just frequent Republican critics of the administration, but Democrats as well, say that if you don't, the embargo has been passed and maintained in place by both Democratic and Republican administrations since 1960s.
In keeping with the foreign policy agenda of the United States up
Right,
to,
but
up to now.
until it is no longer the law of the land, you're saying that the executive branch doesn't believe that it has an obligation to defend it?
We have an obligation to obey it and to follow it, and that's what we're doing.